Hello, this is Bruno pelletier-bacquaert. So this is our next video for Fly Me to the Moon. And I know some of you might be thinking that, we're spending a lot of time on that song. What's up with that? Well, it's a great song, and I want to show you a lot of different approaches for the improvisation in particular. And I want you to keep in mind that a lot of those devices, those little patterns and whatnot, we can use them for a lot of songs. Just about any jazz standard that has, you know, 2/5s and 2/5/1s, that's going to be the same. You know, you will be able to use a lot of those similar patterns. So today, in particular, I want to show you some little lines that we're going to use as patterns, but those lines are handed over to us by the melody. You know, the melody is actually, there are two interesting guide tone lines that we're going to extract from the melody, and you'll see what I mean right away. So starting with the very beginning, that first phrase starts on the C note here, and the first phrase is this, right? I'm playing it very straight. So we're going to think 4 notes for the first chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and then this is the first note of the next chord. So what are those notes? We're starting with an A minor chord, right? So the C note is the third of that A minor chord, all right? And we're gonna go scale-wise, descending. So the C goes down to the B, down to the A, down to the G, and that's the fourth and last note of my first chord. And then I continue scale-wise, and I land into the third of my D minor, which is the next chord, right? So what's interesting to notice is that those notes are respectively from the A minor. For the A minor, it's the third, the second, the root, the seventh, and then now I get to enter my D minor chord with its third. So that pattern, I'm going to leave it as that. And it means that every other measure, I'll initiate the descent from the third through the seventh and enter the next chord and sit on that note with the third. So this is what we end up with. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's D minor, G7. That's C is my F chord. That's B half diminished. And here's my E into A minor, right? So what happens is it's the same pattern. Every new chord is entered through the third, and either I descend all the way through the seventh, or I just sit on the third, right? Let me play the same thing up an octave, and I'll play the chords underneath. So first chord is A minor, and here's D minor, so I stay on the F note, which is the third of my D minor. Next chord is G7, so I start with the B, which is the third of the G, and go scale-wise descending, and then enter the next chord, which is C major. We can think of it as C7 for the second half of that measure, but you know, since I'm staying on that E note, whether I'm thinking C major 7th or C dominant 7th, the E is still the third, right? The next chord is F major, so I'm entering it with A and going downwards. I land on the B minor, and my next chord is E7, and continuing the descent. All right, so let me play this in time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. underneath. So I hope you're able to see how, or to hear, I should say, how it unfolds throughout those first 8 measures, right? As usual, the reason why we do all this stuff is so that you can hear it, you know. So you want to be able to hum along. Once you can play it, once you've, you know, played through it 3, 4, 5 times, you know what it sounds like. So hum it to yourself as you play. 3, 4, 3, 4, right? Because that's how you will remember the sound of that pattern, not so much by the mathematical formulas. I know I keep repeating myself, but every time you work on something like this, you may write it out. In fact, I will write those out for you, so you can download the PDFs in the notes. But you can write it out for yourself or read them, understand what they are, but it will not help you until you are really, really hearing those notes, like, you know, in your subconscious, so that when you improvise for real, you will tap into those notes and you'll create phrases that are generated by those seemingly simple patterns. I mean, there are simple patterns, but, you know, you can generate an infinity of lines with that. Okay, now let's now that we figure out what the concept was, you know, we have this sort of skeleton of the original melody. Let's use the same principle, but on every single chord. Instead of doing it every other bar, let's do it on every single bar and see what happens. Now, let me show you first what's going to happen. There's going to be a problem, but we'll fix it right away, so don't worry. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Etc. And I'm running out of notes, right? Why is that? Because the pattern keeps descending, right? And after a while, like, I wasn't even halfway through my first 8 measures, I was running out of notes. So to fix that, we are going to create a sort of a perpetual motion by simply rebooting the pattern up an octave every now and then. So when it starts getting a bit low, before it gets too low, we'll just jump up an octave so that we can continue like that, you know, so it'll just cycle through. Now, we're not going to reboot anywhere. One thing we have to make sure we respect is that voice leading, that very close motion between the 7th of a given chord into the 3rd of the next chord. And that's never more than a whole step. It's a half step or a whole step down, right? So we need to respect that. So we need to always make sure that we enter our new chord respecting the voice leading, so half step or whole step. But once we're into the new chord, we are able to jump up an octave and continue down and so forth, right? So it would give us something like this, like 3, 4. So here's my D minor, here's my G chord, right? But now I'm getting a bit low, right? So instead of going down to that A, I'm going to play the A that is up an octave. And now I have plenty of room to continue down. So this is my... so now I'm entering the F chord through the A. I'm getting a bit low, so instead of going down to this G, I'm going to go up to this G. And then I can continue down. That's my B minor. That's my E. So instead of going, so I'm playing the G sharp against my E chord. Instead of going down to that low F, I'm going to use that higher F. And then I can enter my A minor, still within the same range. So let me play this whole pattern in time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So what we is this, literally, it's a textbook guide tone line. You know, what we have for each and every chord was the same exact pattern. We start with the third, we go through the ninth, the root, the seventh, exit the chord, new chord, bam, within a half step or a whole step, we find the third of that new chord and continue down. Second of that new chord, root of that new chord, seventh of that new chord, next chord, bam, within a step or a whole step, a step or half step, I should say, we enter with the third, and so forth. So that's something that you really, really want to get used to hearing. So play it many times, find, you know, different places on the fretboard where you could play that, hum along, and it will really, really give you this very deep insight into that chord progression. But that's not all. The next pattern we're going to see today is also given away by the melody, and that's what happens on the second measure. Remember, it opens like this, but instead of staying on that note, it was going up, right? So we're in the D minor. We have this. What are those four notes? We can play them down an octave even. What are those notes? Anyone can figure it out? They are an F major grouping. Remember the grouping? We saw that in the previous video. F, G, A, C. That's the major form of the formal groupings that we were seeing very recently. But the interesting thing here is that we're not playing that from the root of an F chord. We could, but we're not. Here we are still on the D minor chord. So it means that on my D minor chord, I'm looking at an F major grouping from the third. Okay, so that's going to be our little formula. We're going to play a different grouping from the third of those chords. And we can start by doing that every other chord, and then we'll see what happens when we do it on every single chord. So I will write that out for you because it's going to be a little more involved. Keep in mind that the grouping that you play from the third is always going to be a different type of grouping than the one that would have been from the root. So for instance, the first chord, A minor, so the root is A, it's an A minor chord, but I'm going to play my grouping from the C note, which is the third, and it's going to be a C major grouping. Remember, that's the same thing that was happening on that D minor, right? We had D minor, the third was F, and we were playing F major grouping, right? So if I transfer that to A minor 7, the third is C, I'm going to play a C major grouping, right? So you get this. Those are the notes that we end up with, and then we'll land on the D minor, on the F, and then we can let that F note ring again. So we can use basically the same every other measure format that we used previously. So again, we have the next chord is G7, so the third is B, and from that B we will play a B diminished pattern. And we land into the C chord, which could be also a C7 for the second half, but you know, since we're staying on the E note, that's the same third. The next chord is F, so from the third of F, which is A, we'll play an A minor pattern, and then we'll land on the B half diminished. The next chord is E7, and G sharp is the third, and from that G sharp we'll play another diminished pattern. Right? So let me do that slowly in time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4 is G7. C7. F. This is B half diminished. And then right? So it sounds pretty, right? Doesn't it? But it's because it's all perfect. It's all applying those little four-note groupings, which are again very stable little four-note groups. It's very stable. The ear likes them. We can relate to them, but what we're doing again, what's different than last time, we're playing them from the third of the chord and no longer from the root. And the last thing I want to discuss with you right now is what would happen if we were playing that same idea of using a grouping from the third, but now, once again, instead of doing it every single chord, we could do it on every chord, right? So A minor, we're going to have this, and then F major against the D minor, and then B diminished against the G7, E minor, or E diminished, actually, if we want to think of the B flat note, right, which is really the correct way of exiting the chord, but we could really go either way. My next chord is F. I'm going to the B minor, and in this case I'm going to play D minor pattern. And then this is my E chord. I'm playing a G sharp diminished. And that's into the A minor. So let me do it again, but in time, and I'll try not to stop this time, so I won't talk. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very systematic and very simple pattern descending, and the formula, again, I keep stressing that, is the same. In this case, it's a grouping, one of the three groupings that we know of, major or minor or diminished, depending on the chord, and that is always starting from the third of each chord. Okay, so that's going to be it for today. Work on those things. Take your time through that. You know, I know some of you might think this is taking forever, or I can't think that much or whatever. But just it's really all about the sound. It's all about the sound. So if you play those things often, you'll start hearing the sound, the feeling of those notes weaving their way through the chords. And you know, it's not about math. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions or problems with that, and then I'll see you some other time. Bye.